Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome back. Cumberland Outdoorsman here with you again. And today, I'll be going back about 200 years or so into American history, just briefly. And that's the reason I'll be wearing this traditional American felt hat instead of my usual camo-style baseball cap. And I'll be bringing you something else that's traditional, an American tradition. We'll be going into the early to mid 1800s and be covering the heyday of the American mountain man. In 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition began, and it opened the doorway for other American entrepreneurs to come in and try to make a living trapping for fur-bearing animals such as beaver at the time. Men such as Hugh Glass, Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith, Kit Carson, and probably the most notable and now most famous American mountain man, Jeremiah Johnson, that was made famous from a 1972 movie starring Robert Redford, where he portrayed an American mountain man going into the wilds of the Rocky Mountains and living amongst native Indian tribes and other mountain men. They would come from states such as Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Kentucky and stop along the way to pick up supplies such as traps, axes, cooking utensils, powder and lead, sugar, salt, coffee, whatever they needed on their journey out west. And amongst their most prized possession, they would pick up a rifle that it was of suitable caliber for the necessities of the American West. The Kentucky flintlock rifle of 32 or 36 caliber was a fine, accurate arm, but it just didn't have enough power to handle the bigger game from out west, such as elk, moose, bears, like the big grizzly bears, and of course the biggest of North American game, the American bison or buffalo, which was a main source of food for these men as they traveled out west. They needed calibers that were above 45 caliber, the most popular probably being the 50 or the 54 caliber, and a shorter, more handy rifle than the long Kentucky rifles, yet something that packed a good wallop whenever it would hit something. And they also encountered other dangers besides the harsh environment, the cold environment of the Rocky Mountains. They encountered native Indian tribes, and some of which were quite fierce and hostile to any intruders on their territory, such as the Blackfoot Indians. But that was a very risky, very dangerous lifestyle. Yet it was at a time when America was still young, and there was a good profit to be made off of beaver pelts at the time, because there was a demand for beaver pelts in Europe. So these men would go out west. Some of them were free trappers that would trap just for themselves, and the profits that they made were entirely theirs. And others worked for big companies such as the Hudson Bay Company, where they would go out in groups and they were under contract to actually trap for the company. Well, anyway, the rifles of the time, there were many American gun makers, but the one that's probably the most notable and the most legendary was the St. Louis Hawken. That was the one that was the most desired, probably the highest quality rifle of the time. And then, as the years went by and fashion trends changed, just like they do today, the demand for beaver pelts fell off. And also the popularity of the American muzzleloading rifle fell off because of the invention of repeating arms and breech-loading arms such as the Sharps and the Henry and of course the Winchester. No longer did you have to pour your powder in the barrel and load one shot at a time. You had an arm that you could instantly reload several times, and that made things much easier. A lot of times you'd miss the first shot and you had several to follow up. So the popularity of the muzzleloading rifle fell off. Well then, in about 1970 or so, there was a resurgence in popularity for hunting and shooting with a muzzleloading rifle. And the one gun that came about that was responsible for most of the resurgence anyway was the Thompson Center Hawken rifle. Now this doesn't look exactly like the St. Louis rifle. They didn't have this much brass on them, you know, the brass trigger guard and patch box and all that. But it's still a very traditional rifle, and it is a muzzleloading rifle. This one is a cap lock. In other words, it shoots percussion caps instead of a flintlock. This one here is a little bit fancier, as I said, as the normal regular St. Louis Hawken rifle of the time, because most of the hardware on the original Hawken rifles had iron hardware here instead of brass. And these rifles just simply brought out a more traditional sense of hunting and shooting for the American shooter at the time. And since then, there were several different companies that came about that produced these, such as CVA and Traditions. Lyman makes one that's very authentic. And from doing some research online now, you can actually buy a brand new, genuine St. Louis Hawken rifle, made exactly like they were back in the day. But be prepared to pay some premium prices for that gun, because it is a genuine Hawken rifle, even though it's brand new. But anyway, the muzzleloading season will be starting here in Tennessee in a few weeks, and that's the reason I brought this old gun out, and the reason I'm making this video is in case you're a hunter and you want to try hunting with a traditional black powder rifle instead of an inline. Inlines are fine, don't get me wrong. I use one myself, but occasionally I like to use the old Hawken rifle just to kind of rekindle the spirit of the American mountain man. To get out and actually hunt with something as traditional as my Hawken rifle here is quite an experience in itself. And these guns here now are becoming quite a legend of their own. You know, they're no longer being made. This one here I made from a kit many, many years ago, and I've taken several deer with this gun. So it's more than capable of taking down a whitetail. This one's in 50 caliber. I should point that out there. It says 50 cal right there on the barrel. 50 caliber Hawken. And these are really well built guns. They're very well made, and they're amazingly accurate. So before I decide to go out in the woods with this gun, I'm going to check and make sure that it's sighted in correctly, as you should if you decide to do this. And we're going to have a little fun at the range, shooting some steel targets and a few other things. And we'll just make sure the gun's properly zeroed and sighted in for the upcoming season. And incidentally, I should mention, if you are after a big deer, big rack buck, the muzzleloading rifle season, especially the first one that starts at the beginning of November, is the best time to be in the woods to harvest a big mature whitetail, because that's right at the beginning of the chase phase of the rut, generally speaking. So, you know, if you want to get out and harvest a nice deer and also relive the tradition of hunting with a muzzleloading rifle, I can't think of anything better to use than a traditional Hawken rifle. So let's get out on the range and have a little fun and see how well this old gun can shoot. We'll see you there. But what we're going to do today is shoot this muzzleloader. I've got some different projectiles I'd like to try out, and I recently got my hands on some genuine black powder. Most people use powder such as this Pyrodex. This is a black powder substitute. This is FFG equivalent, which is 2F, same as this one here. This is more of a select grade of black powder here. This is made by GoEx, And you're probably familiar with the standard GoX bottle that is red and black. This one is actually Old Ensford, and it's more of a refined and higher quality black powder. But we're going to see how this rifle performs with traditional black powder and Pyrodex today. I've got some targets downrange, and we're going to give it a try. Now, that being said, I already know what this old rifle will do because I've hunted with it and I've harvested several deer with it, white-tailed deer. So I know that it's a solid performer. So let's see what the old gun can do today. We're going to try some patched round balls. These are made by Hornady. And I've got some treated patches already for 50 caliber. And these are just regular lead round balls of, let's see, they're .495 diameter, 50 caliber, 180 grains. And we're just going to be shooting some mild loads. But then also, we're going to try a bullet that I've been using for hunting, or that I have used in the past for hunting, and that's this Hornady Great Plains bullet. This one's a 385 grain hollow point. These are really good bullets. They come pre-lubed already from Hornady with a natural lube on them. That's the bullet. Give you a close-up. Has a hollow base with a hollow tip. They're soft lead, so they mushroom really well. We're going to be firing these into some water jugs to see what kind of expansion we get. Just like the muzzleloader videos that I brought you here recently, we're going to do a little test with these bullets. Now, I've got some here that I've recovered from deer in the past. These are actually recovered from white-tailed deer that I've taken in the past. That same bullet. You can see how well they mushroomed. Here's another one right here. That bullet really expanded. And here's one that I recovered from firing into wet newspaper. Pretty much does the same thing in wet newspaper as it would on a real game animal. So let me take you through some of the basics of shooting these old traditional muzzle loaders. I've got some products that you might want to consider if you decide to start shooting one of these old guns, if you can get your hands on one or if you already have one. Doesn't have to be a Thompson Center. You know, there's other companies out there that make them or that have made them in the past. I'm not sure if they still do. There's CVA, there's Traditions, let's see, Lyman. They make a very authentic looking muzzle loader. Their Great Plains rifle comes to mind. It's probably the most authentic looking. You know, there's other models made by Thompson Center, such as the Renegade and maybe the White Mountain carbine. And that brings to mind something else. My brother, he originally got me into hunting with a muzzle loader, and I'm glad I did because it's been rather rewarding. So let me show you what we've got here on the table. Okay, this is what's called a possibles bag. For those of you that don't know, this carries all of your supplies that you would need when you're shooting your muzzle loader. Everything from these cappers, such as this one, or this fancier version here, to a nipple wrench. This is one that I made. These are extra nipples for number 11 percussion caps. They're different types of percussion caps, but this is one made by Remington. That's a number 11 percussion cap. These are made by CCI. I just purchased these. These are cleaning jags that you would put on the end of your ramrod using a patch to clean the barrel, clean the bore out. This is a bullet starter, one that I made. This is a powder measure. This is very important, powder measure. And this is a T-handle that I made out of a deer antler. so that you can get extra gripping power on your ramrod. And this here is actually a bullet puller. If you ever get a bullet stuck in the barrel, or you know, a wet powder load and it doesn't want to ignite, and you want to get that bullet out of there and get the barrel cleaned out, you put this on the end of your ramrod and screw the end of it into the front of the bullet, and then you just pull the bullet right on out. Here's some number 13 bore cleaner. This is all natural, water-based, to clean the barrel out. You don't want to use any kind of detergent, really. Well, I mean, you could use detergent. Some people use hot soapy water. What I meant to say is you don't want to use any kind of petroleum-based cleaners when shooting real black powder. And the reason for that is because you want to keep the seasoning that you get in that bore, in that rifle bore, intact. These are seasoning and cleaning patches for muzzle loaders. There you can see they're talking about seasoning the inside of the bore. Those are made by Thompson Center, I believe. Yeah, Thompson Center. And these are CVA, rust prevent patches. They also will season the barrel. This is what the patches look like. They're treated with natural lube, kind of a greasy substance. There you can see some patches that I've run through the barrel after I cleaned it and actually treated the barrel. That's what that barrel's treated with now. And here's some cleaning patches. These are just regular dry patches. So let's get started here. Oh, by the way, this is a flask. This is a powder flask. This one here contains the real black powder. And this is one that I made. This has Pyrodex in it. So let's do a little shooting with this old gun and see how well I can hit these targets down here. I've got some steel targets downrange, and I've also got some water jugs, as I mentioned, we're going to be shooting one of these bullets into to see what kind of performance we get out of that old rifle. Okay folks, now that we're here at the target range, we're getting ready to shoot this Thompson Center Hawken. Let me offer a few safety tips to those of you that are considering shooting one of these or hunting with it. Some of the basics, just to cover them. This is a cap lock, okay? It uses number 11 percussion caps. This is not a flintlock. This is the percussion nipple, and this is what's going to be the ignition source to fire the gun, okay? That's on half cock. That's the safety. You can squeeze the trigger and nothing happens. Hammer stays in place. The only way it's going to fire is if you put the hammer on full cock. And really the safest way to load one of these rifles, you're supposed to put it on half cock, like that, when you put the cap on. Okay? That's on full cock. That's the way the rifle is before you get ready to fire it. This one here has double set triggers, and I'll illustrate how they work. The rear trigger is called your set trigger, and when you pull it all the way back, you can see that front trigger moving ever so slightly. Okay, now the rifle is set for what would be called a hair trigger, and as you can see, all I have to do is apply a little bit of pressure and boom, the rifle fires. I know there's nothing in the gun because I just got done cleaning it and getting ready for this video. So let me take you through the loading process. First of all, before you get ready to load the gun, make absolutely sure there's no percussion cap on the percussion nipple. You don't want any source of ignition for the powder charge when you get ready to load this thing. Also, you never want to pour powder directly into the gun from your main source of powder, whether it's Pyrodex or real black powder, or if you're using a powder flask. You never want to directly pour powder into the barrel, okay? Especially after you shoot, because there could be an ember still burning somewhere inside the barrel, and when you pour that powder into the barrel, it could ignite. And here you are, you've got a grenade in your hand pretty much. Because if that powder ignites through that flask, you know, it could do serious damage. It could even kill you. So never pour directly from a flask or your main source of powder. Always use a powder measure, okay? Today we're going to start out just shooting some target loads. I've got it set on 70 grains here. And here I'm using real black powder. And I'm going to be shooting some black and also some Pyrodex. Okay? No percussion cap on the percussion nipple. Now we're going to go ahead and load this rifle. Make sure you get all of it in there. And also, make sure you keep the muzzle away from your face, pointed away. You can look at it, but just don't keep it directly, your face directly over it, because, you know, if it were to flash, you don't want to burn your face or your eyes. And I've already got some pre-treated patches here. These are pre-treated ball patches. They have natural lube on them. I want to center it over the bore. These are just round balls, 50 caliber round balls. They're pure lead, so they're relatively soft. And you use a ball starter to get them going. Just like that. And then you just ram it all the way home until it stops. Okay? And that's another safety tip there. You always want to make sure that you get it all the way down onto the powder charge. You want your bullet or your ball to be firmly seated on the powder charge. You don't want an air gap in here, because if there's an air gap and that powder charge goes off, it could destroy your gun or blow up. You know, it could bulge the barrel or actually blow the breech off of it, because in effect you have a pipe bomb. So always make sure that that bullet is seated down firmly on the powder charge. I'm going to go ahead and put on my deer antler T-handle here for extra leverage. Incidentally, a lot of muzzleloader shooters will mark their ramrods to know how far the ramrod should go down on a fully loaded powder charge. And it's probably a really good practice to do that. I pretty much know by heart already how far that ramrod needs to be down. Okay, if you have one of these cappers, let me show you how to install the percussion caps so that you don't have to handle them with your fingers, okay? You just want to open the container, pour them inside like that. And then you just want to kind of gently shake them. There's always one that doesn't want to cooperate. Okay, now all of them are upright. You want the open end to be facing upwards. Go ahead and close the cap. Slide the lock in place. Now, in order to get the percussion cap to expose itself, you hold it down, make sure all the caps are pointed downwards like that, and then just hit that lever there, and there you can see there's a percussion cap ready to go. And the safe way to load this rifle, this gun's not really considered loaded yet until you put a percussion cap on there. It's charged but not loaded. So you got it on half cock. The hammer's halfway cocked back. Now the percussion cap is on there. And we got a few targets down here that we're going to be shooting at. I've got a steel target there that's a wild boar, a grizzly bear, and that looks like a Sasquatch over there. I wonder if the early mountain men actually encountered Sasquatch. Well, I'll tell you an interesting story about that when we get ready to shoot him. And then further down, I've got a buffalo. So let's shoot that wild boar first. Let's see if we can hit him. Okay, here we go. Well, that was pretty cool. First shot offhand, and I killed a wild boar. There's the spent percussion cap. Okay, let's see if this old 50 caliber Hawken will bring down this bear. So let's see if a 50 caliber muzzleloader will bring down a Sasquatch. Well, I don't see him anymore. Looks like he got hit. So I've got a variety of targets down here again. I've got some more of those steel targets I've already shot at a few days ago. This is a continuation. I got the wild boar, the bear, the Sasquatch, and the buffalo further down. And I've also got another target. I'm going to be shooting some full house hunting loads at that target to make sure that the gun's sighted in for that particular load. So let me go ahead and take the first shot here. Put my ears on. Okay, the next shot I'm going to be shooting at the bear, and I'm going to try some Pyrodex. Same powder charge, same bullet. Actually, the same patch and round ball. Well, as you can see, the Pyrodex produced just about as much smoke, and maybe it wasn't quite as loud as the black powder, and the firing behavior was somewhat the same. I would say the black powder probably ignited a little bit faster, a little bit better. So anyway, next we're going to shoot the Sasquatch. Well, folks, you got to agree that Sasquatch target is a rather interesting target to shoot at. I hit the other two, and I did knock all three of them down. And then we have the buffalo target, which I'll shoot here in a minute. But I promised you that I would tell you an interesting story regarding Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I was doing a little bit of research on Theodore Roosevelt, and he actually wrote an account of two trappers, two mountain men that went out west in search of beaver pelts, just like I mentioned in the introduction. And they went out into the Rocky Mountains, and at first they didn't have much success, so they decided to go deeper into the wilderness. And there they encountered something. They didn't go into detail exactly what it looked like, but they said it was a large, hairy beast that traveled on two legs. Now these trappers, at that time, they didn't have terms like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They called it something, a goblin or whatever it was. But anyway, they said it was evil looking, and it was constantly amongst their presence while they were out there trapping and around their campsite. And one night, one of the trappers actually shot at it because it got a little bit too close to the campsite. And one of the mountain men, his last name was Bauman. He was the younger of the two. I can't remember the other guy's name. But they were out trapping. They set traps, and one of the older trapper went back to camp. And upon returning to camp, the young man, Bauman, came in and discovered that his friend had been killed by this thing. Neck was broken and body was torn apart. And on multiple occasions, both trappers would return beforehand, before this happened, and found that their campsite had been strewn by some wild animal. And by all accounts, you know, they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what this thing was, but they were haunted by it. And upon discovering his friend's body, Bauman took off out of there. I mean, and he left. He was truly afraid. And you got to remember, this was an account written long before all the Bigfoot craze and all the shows that came out, you know, like Finding Bigfoot or whatever. This was at a time when America was still young and there were a lot of things to be discovered, so they didn't have the terminology that we do nowadays. But President Roosevelt honestly believed that this guy was telling the truth, and when he wrote the account, I'll tell you, it's awful compelling. So I don't know how many of you all out there believe that these things exist. I don't know for sure. I've never actually, I don't think I've ever seen one. I had a strange encounter one time, but I can't say who or what it was. But I'm not going to say one way or the other. I'm cautiously skeptimistic, I would say. But anyway, you know, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know what these people are seeing, and I don't know if all the footprints are hoaxes. Some of them are very compelling. Some of the stories seem genuine when you watch them. But anyway, I decided to use a steel target that represented one of these things just to have something to shoot at, and I thought I'd include it in this video. So, you know, if you have a story of your own, you can share it in the comments below, whether you believe or not. I don't know, but you know, I'm sure some of you out there probably have a story to tell about it, but I wanted to include that in the video as well. So anyway, let me go ahead and shoot that buffalo down there. It's the furthest away and it's the biggest target, so we're gonna give it a shot, and we'll see how well these patch round balls do. I've already hit it twice, so this will be the third shot. Okay, here we go. I'm going to be shooting that buffalo offhand. We'll see if I can hit it. I'll zoom in on it here. Okay, and I got the pig again, just above the rib cage. And the bear got hit behind the shoulder, right next to the first shot there. And we hit the Sasquatch right at the armpit. Not as good a shot as the first one. Now there's 3 shots on the buffalo, all pretty close together right there. Well folks, as you can see, these patched round balls are pretty accurate. You know, they shoot quite well. But what I have traditionally used for deer hunting is these Conical Great Plains bullets. These are 385 grains, nearly 400 grains of lead, okay? And I've had really good results. But we're going to try and see how well they shoot using real black powder. See what kind of groups that I can get at 50 yards. And what I'm going to be using is 90 grains of real black. So let me get it set here. That's at 90 grains there. These I'm sure will have quite a bit more recoil. I'll go ahead and load this gun. Now see, one thing that I should mention is if there were an ember still burning here from the previous shot, just pouring that small amount of powder in there from the powder measure, all you would get is a flash. You might burn your fingers or something, but you wouldn't get an explosion, you know, like you would if you were holding a flask or your main source of powder. So always, once again, I need to stress this, always pour from a powder measure. And you want to know how much powder is going in there anyway. You know, it's anybody's guess how much you can pour directly out of a flask. So there's no need in guessing. Always use a powder measure. Here you don't have a patch, you just put the bullet directly into the bore, just like that. Okay, you want to get it started. And then use your starter there. Get it started into the barrel. And just like with the patched round ball, you want to make sure and fully seat. Make sure it's fully seated all the way down. Okay, got the gun on half cock. Now the gun's loaded. So here we go. Looks like a pretty solid hit. Let's see what we got here. Hopefully I captured that bullet. I see one water jug going down in volume. Looks like it hit that one pretty squarely. Blew it apart. Or demolished 3 of these water bottles. Looks like it creased. Went through this one, so it went through 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and there's the bullet laying right there. Wow. That's a hunk of lead right there. It completely mushroomed, going all the way over the base of the bullet there. Hitting water jugs at 50 yards. Looks like it retained all of its weight too. That's a pretty small target all the way down there, but we'll see how well the gun shoots using real black powder. So I'm going to be shooting off these sandbags now. Okay, this will be the last shot at the target. Then we're going to shoot into the water jugs with that bullet, see what kind of expansion we get. I just cleaned the barrel, so we'll see if point of impact changes. Remember, I'm using open sights here. We'll see where this bullet hits at that target. Same load, same bullet, same distance. Okay, that one hit off to the side just a little bit, but still well within the vitals of a deer at that distance. Okay, this is another expansion test, shooting at water jugs at 50 yards. All right, let's see if we capture that bullet there. It looks like a pretty good hit. Totally destroyed the first jug there. Second jug. Third jug. Fourth jug, it went in right here. Came out right there. I hear something. Oh, that's part of the bullet. Part of the bullet came off. And let's see. Did that bullet come out? Went into this jug. There it is. That expanded even more, but you can see that's some good positive expansion from the 385 grain Great Plains bullet in 50 caliber shot out of my Thompson Center Hawken. Any big game animal that gets hit by that at a reasonable distance wouldn't go very far, folks. That's quite a bit of energy transfer and tissue destruction out of a hunting bullet. Well, folks, if you stayed with me through the entire video, let me first of all commend you and thank you. I really appreciate you watching. I know there was a lot of content in this video and it was rather long. And I know some of the points that I covered, especially the safety aspects, I was a little bit redundant, but I'm always going to drive home any points of safety whenever I'm handling a firearm, no matter what it is, even if it's a muzzleloader. I think safety just simply cannot be overstressed. And, you know, those of us that have been in the sport for a long time are aware of all the safety issues, but it doesn't hurt to get a refresher course every now and then. And for those of you that are starting in hunting and fishing and whatever else, if you're handling any kind of weapon, I think it's important for you to know, you know, all of the issues regarding safety. Well, with that being said, I hope you also had a little bit of fun watching the video. Here shooting on the range at the steel targets and also doing the ballistics tests. The last target I shot at was this one here at 50 yards. I think that's a 3-inch target, I believe. I think that's 3 inches. But anyway, the first 2 shots fell right here below the bullseye, and then I cleaned the barrel and I didn't season the bore at all with anything, and then I fired that shot and I changed my point of impact just a little bit. It shifted over. But usually with that rifle there, from firing it in the past and knowing about it, they usually group right in around the bullseye there at that range. So I'm more than confident in using that gun. And I really look forward to hopefully using that traditional muzzleloader in an upcoming hunt and being successful with it. I would just love to bring that to you. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a big buck or just a doe. I have no problem harvesting a good-sized doe. And usually does are better eating anyway. You know, the meat is of better quality. But as you could see from the ballistics tests that I did from the previous videos and this one here, you know, when you get performance like that, you get bullets that mushroom out to quarter-size discs like that, you know that the projectiles you're using are going to be effective on the game that you're pursuing. And that kind of performance is suitable for any deer-sized game, and I would say even up to black bear or for hogs. You know, if you're going to hunt hogs, that 385 grain bullet is a substantial bullet to use for that type of game. And then you can also get heavier bullets, you know, that go up to 450 to 500 grains for that 50 caliber, and you can pursue heavier game such as elk and even bigger bears, you know, moose, caribou, whatever your choice is. And you can load the charge heavier too, provided you can handle the recoil. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the muzzleloader season is quickly approaching. And as you can see, the daylight's fading some. Days are not lasting as long, and that just marks the approach of another muzzleloader season here in Tennessee. And I pointed out that that first week of muzzleloader season is usually the best time for you to go in the woods to harvest a big mature whitetail. Here I've got a few samples of trophy whitetails that I've harvested with the muzzleloader. There's a big 10-point that I killed a few years ago on opening day. That's a muzzleloader kill. Anyway, this is a big 10-point that I harvested a few years ago with my Thompson Center Omega. And that was a very mature deer. Big old buck, you know. He's been around a few days. And then here's another one that I harvested, I think 2 years ago. That was opening morning of muzzleloader season. It's a nice 8-point, good trophy class animal. And then here's the one that I killed last year. And if you follow my channel, this is one that I harvested, I think it was a week into the muzzleloader season, that first week. That made a really beautiful mount too. You know, pretty good deer. So if you're after a big whitetail buck, like I said, that first week of muzzleloader season is usually the best time, because that's when they're entering the chase phase, and there's a lot of deer activity, and you'll see a lot of does running around, and usually they're being chased by one or more bucks. And if you practice a little patience, sooner or later a good trophy-sized animal like the ones I have here will come your way. And if you're a good marksman and you've been practicing with your muzzleloader and you know what that gun's going to do, you shouldn't have any problems at all harvesting that animal. So anyway, this will close out the video, and let me just say I enjoyed having you with me, and I enjoyed making the video. I've always kind of wanted to do this. And also remember, if you can get outdoors and you can go hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, whatever it is you like, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And remember also, hit that like button, hit the bell icon, and subscribe. That way you'll know when more videos like this will be coming your way. So y'all get out there and enjoy the great outdoors. And here's another quote for you from the old mountain men. Watch your top knot and keep your powder dry. So until next time, y'all take care, my friends. We'll see you.